Welcome back to Continuing the Conversation, where we bring you authentic AI insights. Here's what's been driving me crazy. Too many business leaders are treating AI just like another software rollout. They hand it off to IT, who approaches it the same way they did email servers back in 1995, as a risk to control instead of intelligence to unleash. And that's not caution, that's sabotage. Today, we're diving into the IT trap, why treating AI like software is crippling your organization and what to do instead. I'm your host, Chelene Martin, AI enthusiast, business strategist, and co-founder of Revenue Pulse Advisors. Joining me today, as always, is my good friend, Rob, the CEO of CharmIQ. Rob, welcome back.
Hey, everybody.
So, Rob, so many IT departments are treating AI deployment like any other software rollout. Pick a vendor, negotiate a contract, set up security, train users. Why is this approach completely wrong for AI? Let's dig in.
This is just a fantastic question and so timely. We are seeing so much weirdness going on. I love this one because if you've been paying attention to the rest of our podcasts and listening in, you can just literally see this kind of walking along. And I would say this has been fascinating from me being at this point in my career and seeing all this. Like, you build up such a interesting trove of experiences. And like this one, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
Yes.
So what's going on here? We've been talking to a lot of people and we've been seeing like, how are they starting to implement AI, whatever that AI is, right, in the workplace? And we're finding it the exact same thing everywhere right now. So as we've been saying, everyone is treating AI, whatever that means, as just a tool, right? So I have AI, which typically means you have a ChatGPT or a Copilot. And because everyone thinks of AI as just a tool, it's just simply being handed to IT, and IT just treats it like a tool because they haven't been informed about what it is. There's no corporate strategy for this other than the fact that this must be made available to all the workers. I want to say at the outset here that we are not faulting IT or anything. They are doing exactly what it is that they are mandated and trained and practice to do.
Yep.
And so if anything, this is a statement about how businesses are continuing to not think about AI correctly. If your organization, if you have the smell of AI making its way down to IT and IT then pushing back up what the solution is, then like you should be raising the flag in your organization and saying, hey, wait a minute, like we really need to talk about how we think about AI as an organization. Let me drop a couple things that we don't usually talk about in here, which is like, we should talk about breaking up, again, AI in quotes, into a couple of buckets here. One is we're typically talking about Gen AI versus traditional AI. So we're definitely talking about image generation and video generation and text generation and things like that.
Yeah.
If you just look at a standard organization, the people who are really starting to use Gen AI these days tend to be marketing, because it's really helpful in generating content, thumbnails, videos, lots of visual collateral. Everybody else, which tends to not be on the image and video side, it tends to be much more just on the text side of things. And so what we're really, really not seeing is a lot of people talking about all of the possibilities of image and video generators. There are dozens and dozens of them out there. So from the Klings to whatever else that you're involved in. And we're not hearing about those, which is really, really fascinating. In no conversation have I ever had with a business leader or anything do they talk about it. Everyone's talking about ChatGPT.
Yep.
I don't know how the best way to express this, but Grammarly comes up. Grammarly comes up as an answer to AI. Like, we are doing AI because we have Grammarly. And that's bizarro when it happens, just to say. But I do just want to briefly restate that image and video generators are being treated completely independently as almost as truly as a tool. And I would almost say those you can, because they are monotaskers in that realm. You are not sitting there and you are not using them to inspire thoughts, and you can't really use that for thought leadership in that space. So what's really weird is I'm not seeing those things being pushed down to IT. Mm-hmm. And that's weird, because I would think that would be something that would go through IT and there would be, purchasing and whatnot decisions that way. So I'm just trying to paint a landscape for our listeners. What are the things that you should be listening for? If you're a leader out there, what are you hearing in your org? And spend a little bit of time in here, especially for people who would be traditionally using image and video generators. So marketing, obviously. anything customer facing. So your product managers, for example, may be using it. And look at that, how that's going through. But then let's talk to the 10,000 pound gorilla in the room, which is like the I have AI bucket, which is the co-pilots for Microsoft and for code, the ChatGPTs, which is just the ubiquitous answer today. And then the Geminis for those that are using Google as your thing, as your platform for documentation and so forth. Just painting that landscape. And then now, so what's going on? Well, this goes to IT, right? Because IT is just like, well, our people need AI. And then, well, even though I've seen everyone like have the discussions, if you're a Microsoft shop, you're going to use Copilot for Microsoft. If you're a Google shop, you're going to have Gemini for that. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're going to have your ChatGPT license. Like, we have not heard any other discussions had about any other tool, even when it comes to things like Notion and whatnot. Those just tend to be part of this solution or anyway. Like if the Figmas and all these other tools that just have AI built in, we don't hear about any of that going through IT. So again, the AI stuff is specifically on those things, the Copilots, the Geminis, and the ChatGPTs. Just think about that. Like, you're presupposing that the way you're going to use this is just like a single model, a single tool, and so forth. And again, if you've listened to our discussions throughout, like, you should be talking about, in fact, you should be empowering your teams with multiple models. And your strategy should be around that. Like, how do you enable all of those things? And of course, you need IT involved, because the reason why this is happening the way it's happening is everyone's looking at it from an IT perspective, because again, it's a tool. And then secondary, they're looking at it from a standard security perspective. Like, what should and shouldn't I put into ChatGPT? And we hear all of the usual stuff, which is like, you can't put the company information in it. You can't put PII in it, because everyone hears these horror stories about what's going on. But again, if you spend a little bit of time and read your license from it, as long as you have an enterprise license, et cetera, your data is not used for training for those models. On the flip side, if you're using the free version of ChatGPT and everything else, your data is being used for training and other information. So what I want to make sure that, again, that business leaders are thinking about is that if you are not enabling your teams through IT, through an enterprise or other business license of it, and your people are just using it on their own through maybe their own personal account or whatever, then you are likely using PII. And this is the discussion that you should be having with your team. Is not like, we're going to force you over here and you can't use this thing with certain use cases. My mind's always blown, because like, the advice is 180 degrees from like what is correct and what is necessary. So there's no finger pointing and fault pointing and all. This stuff is moving fast. Everything is changing. Everything is different. And you have to spend time. So not only is IT setting up policy, not only are they setting up usage patterns and how do you think about it and using it, and they're trying to apply security to it, and they're trying to use it in this way. But again, without that strategic oversight of like, what are we doing with this? How do we think about it? You're just going to end up in this bad thing. So hopefully wrapping that whole thing up in a nutshell.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing you say is, software standardizes, AI thrives on diversity, right? And if leaders don't internalize that, then they're already kind of behind, not just passing it over to IT. And you did kind of touch on this, and I want you to go a little deeper, because everywhere I look, and all the companies I'm talking to, I'm hearing the same things you are. Companies are limiting themselves to Microsoft Copilot, especially if they're a Microsoft, organization. If they're a, Google organization, it's Google Gemini, and then the rest is all OpenAI's ChatGPT. Those are the three intelligence options for the entire organization, and they pick one or the other. They don't pick all three. And that's kind of what's wrong and what is concerning, I know, to me and to you. So let's dig a little deeper. What's wrong with that picture when leaders say, okay, I'm the CEO, I'm the leader, we're going to go with Gemini, right? What's wrong with that picture?
Yeah. And so, as I said earlier, what's interesting is if you already are a Microsoft shop, you're going to use Copilot. And if you're already a Google shop, you're going to use Gemini. Just because, again, when IT looks at it, they're going to see this as an offering already in their product suite. And they're going to be like, well, why would I do a different thing? Like, I'm not going to use Microsoft Copilot within a Google suite environment. That just doesn't make sense. You just wouldn't do it. So of course you're going that way. But what's important to note, this, hold on, misunderstanding or understanding about AI right now is that you can use Gemini independent of its integration into the Google Suite. You can use, well, if you use Microsoft Copilot, it's basically you're using ChatGPT anyway. So you can use ChatGPT independent of your Microsoft suite. So it's interesting that the enablement is going through the traditional enterprise channels. And that's one thing. Why is it happening? It's just because it's going that way. And the second is, as well, as we've said many times now, limiting yourself to a single model is like limiting yourself to that single piece of advice, that single source of truth that you have. And right now, given how different the models are, given how different the feedback and the understanding is from these models, you should be using all of them. And I'll admit, and again, as always, I hate to be a salesperson for my own product. You want a platform in which you can use all these models and you can bring them all in independent of their sources, et cetera. You want all of the input you can. So if you had an opportunity to get consultants from like the top 3 consulting firms at the same like price, why wouldn't you get all of that insight from them?
Yes.
And what's also interesting is the vendor lock-in that you're getting. For example, just this morning, we're recording this on August 21st, Anthropic had an outage with their Sonnet models. And like that's, if you were in bed with them and that was what you were doing, then you were basically hosed for 2 hours this morning and you couldn't do anything. So another one of the problems that people are getting into by picking one and only one model is when you're in a vendor brownout kind of situation, you're stuck with those. I guess I should say one thing. Obviously, from an IT perspective, it is much easier to have a single subscription that you're managing and a single set of policies that you're managing. And of course, by having multiple platforms that you're dealing with, it is a lot more work. But again, if your company's strategy is to enable all of your people with these different voices and so forth, then IT just simply has to come up with a policy that allows all those to be used.
Right. Yeah. And I think, just cutting yourself off from whole worlds of intelligence based on which one you go for. And there are platforms like CharmIQ and others that have like the ability to have multiple models in one secure platform with one contract, with one monthly subscription that makes it really easy. And then, and we'll get into this a little bit too, is each department, because sales has different needs than marketing and legal and product and IT, right? So all of those different divisions of your organization have different needs, different goals, and different challenges, and need different tools to work through that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But the elephant in the room often, and I know you come across this as well, when we're talking about AI, is security. IT rolls out restrictive AI policies that focus on what people can't do. And what's really happening inside the organization, and you've sort of touched on it, is something completely different. Because when AI came out, they said, we have to have some policies and procedures around what people absolutely cannot do. And at first it was like, you can't use it at all. Right. And now at least we're seeing people saying, well, that's not the right choice. But talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, as I touched on earlier, the main thing that I'm seeing is all of the thou shall nots. And it all tends to be around like customer data and everything else. And I want to emphasize those are perfect policies to have with a lot of third-party situations. But all of the major model vendors have licenses that are extremely restrictive with respect to what they will do with your information. And again, spend the time, make sure you are completely conversant in it. A lot of them have a toggle that you can switch. A lot of them have it by default in their business plans turned like to we will not use your information. So again, just make sure that you look at that and you correctly limit yourself and you correctly do all that stuff. I want to make sure that everyone knows you should be thinking about the security constraints, especially if you're using, there's a lot of third-party tools out there that are just open source that you can go use and so forth. For example, when everyone got on the DeepSeek bandwagon, that was being run out of China from a Chinese company, and say whatever you think about whatever you want with that. But like your PII is going across the world to somewhere else. So be very careful and be very cognizant of that, especially with some of the aggregator tools that are out there. So I always use OpenRouter as my example. It allows you to basically use all LLMs available, but there are specific flags in there that you have to set and say, only allow models that don't allow my PII to be scraped, and like all of this stuff. So like everyone is cognizant of this. So if your platform that you're using doesn't make it explicit or doesn't have a checkbox or something, like then triple check because it's probably leaking out the door. And the standard answer that I'm going to say, which always happens in these new situations, when the internet first came out, when all these tools first come out, there's always this shadow situation that happens, right? So people who have provisioned laptops, of course, they always bring their own laptop in. And of course, they use their own phone on your network. And I know people try to lock this stuff down and it's barely worked in cases. But the same thing is happening here. And again, do what's appropriate for your organization. But just remember that the tighter the restrictions are, the more likely people are going to try to circumvent them in ways that are actually worse for you. As I mentioned earlier, people are using their personal free accounts, and you absolutely are leaking information via those things. So have those discussions with your people. Now is the time to, like, just like as if you have a teenager growing up, like, you have to have those discussions with them. This is the time to start having those discussions with all of your staff. I will say this is primarily, people talk about this with respect to like the ChatGPTs and the text models. But again, the same thing is absolutely true with the image models. And the video models, because if you're doing image to video, if you're doing image to image and so forth, make sure you're checking those licenses and checking whether or not those things are potentially training on maybe your product data and things like that that you may not want. And of course, the right answer isn't just like everybody does everything. The right answer is have the discussions with people, come up with it. This is one of these weird situations. This is all brand new. I don't think you can take your standard off-the-shelf IT policy and just stamp it on there. And I understand that the IT departments are really, overwhelmed as always and have extremely limited budgets and time. But this is one of those that you're going to need a little bit of extra time on.
Yeah, because this, like you mentioned, and want to be very clear, this isn't about us like criticizing IT professionals. They're doing their job. But AI strategy, it's more about that AI strategy requires a different skill set. And there's sort of a mismatch about who's making this decisions, right? When it comes to IT, absolutely security, maybe even implementation. But where is the mismatch when we think about an AI strategy might require a different skill set when it comes to decision making and guardrails and implementation?
This is a fantastic question, and it's really going to rope together all of the stuff that we've just been talking about, which is everyone sees AI as a tool. It gets pushed down through the standard tool chain. It ends up in IT's lap. They're just like, oh crap, there's another thing. I'm going to pick the vendor that fits with the package I already have, and they already make it easy for me. Nothing wrong with all those things. I'm going to go back to my IT standard security policies that I have. I'm going to augment the ones that I have, and I'm just going to say, standard stuff. But we're missing from up above. And so you asked the $1 million question here, which is like, who owns AI today? And it's really crazy because right now, as we're trying to say here, it's being owned by IT, which is, when you really think about it, that's a terrible idea, again, for the reasons that we've said. And it needs to be owned by some executive champion, whether that's coming from perhaps marketing. And as much as I hate to say it, but nobody listens to marketing. And I always feel so bad for those folks in marketing. Like, there tends to not be a lot of change pushed through an org from marketing. But again, one of the first places you're seeing AI being really scooped up is through your marketing team. So if whoever executive champion that you have in your org, and if your org is small, it's probably the CEO. If they're not talking to the marketing department and saying, like, how are you using this? How would you like to use this? Like, let's come up with a strategy. And again, I'm a huge advocate for not pushing AI down. Don't think of it as a tool. You should be thinking of it as thought partners that are going to your exec team and your management team. And you all need to get together and like talk about how you want this thing to be used. And again, come up with a policy and a strategy that maps to how you would like it to be used. And I'll just say, like, this industry is moving at a breakneck speed. So like, we're talking about this now, but if you're listening to the industry, we're talking about, AGI, a generalized intelligence. You're potentially talking about augmenting large amounts of the workforce with this stuff. So you shouldn't be talking about tools today. You should truly be talking about your 5-year roadmap. You should be talking about at least start talking about, like, what does it mean for our organization? How are we going to, like, what is it going to do for our, you could think of a way, for example, by saying, like, before we hire any new resources, we should see whether that we could empower an existing resource with additional faculties through AI to not hire another resource. So, like, find places in your organization, find gates in your organization that force you to then have this larger discussion about how it's used. And again, then have IT support support those decisions that are being made rather than the other way around.
Absolutely. I love that you've often said, that the skills to secure servers or new tools, right? Like basic tools aren't the same skills to orchestrate intelligence. Yeah. And that's what AI is. It's artificial intelligence. It's not artificial tool. And you and I always talk a lot about this isn't just another tool. This is really about a relationship with intelligence and how to strategize that and implement it across the organization. And as all leaders know, organizations have different needs, goals, and challenges. And that's why I always start with the CEO. I start at the CEO level because these tools, this platform, this intelligence can help them so much once they see the power of that intelligence making them a better, stronger, faster CEO. Often CEOs said, if I could give you one thing, what would it be? And I'm like, I need 5 of me, and I go, great, here we go. Yeah. I can give you 10. Right. And so once they see the power of the intelligence, they don't just see it like a tool, right? They see it as a platform to empower all divisions of their organization. And that's the power. Absolutely. They're going to need IT, marketing, the CFO, legal, everyone involved, and each tool will be customized for that organization. So that's what I love about really empowering the CEO and starting there, or starting with an executive champion, like you said, that has a seat at the table. So let's quantify this. When companies treat AI through the IT lens, there's risk and there's loss. So let's just hit on a couple points so the CEOs listening or the executives listening can kind of just go, aha, we have to change the strategy. So what are some things that we can actually lose if we're just pushing it down to IT or just leaving it in the hands of marketing? Absolutely.
And I think you just picked on the two that are exactly the right kind of thing. So if you're looking for 2 smells in your organization, which is if IT is making the AI decision in policy, then basically stop and think about what's going on. Like, call us up, call Chelene, call me, like DM me on whatever platform. Like we need to talk because you need to think about this. So that's one great smell. And I love anytime it's like easy, right? Like you go into orgs and you're like, hey, if this thing's getting pushed down to IT, like ring the bell, raise the flag. Like that's one thing. And the second thing is if it's already happening in your marketing department and nobody is talking about it outside your marketing department, or again, if people are just using ChatGPT in their own account, again, that bell needs to be rung because you need to be having a holistic discussion. Again, IT absolutely needs to be in that discussion because you do need to talk about, IP leakage and like all these things. Those discussion needs to be had. So I love you pick those two because they're exactly the most, I don't want to say obvious, but they are it's like when they put that skunk oil in gas specifically so that when you can smell it when something is leaking. And those are like the 2 skunk oil that exactly is what you need to be looking for in your organization. And again, so roping all that back around is this ain't going away. And I know that we're every single day, we hear we're in a bubble, we hear that we've maxed out. Like, again, from my standpoint, the fact that we're still talking about things that people haven't even done yet. Everyone's using this thing as a tool and we're trying to push. Chelene already said it. I say it every time. It's called artificial intelligence. It's not called artificial automation. It's not called artificial tool. It's not called artificial efficiency. It's artificial intelligence. And I think that that is so apropos because we are building intelligence. And you need to start thinking about it that way. And if you're already getting your team frustrated because they can't buy a tool, or again, if your company has already pushed this down to IT and you already have a policy without realizing how you're going to use it, you have to take the step back and you're going to have to think about this because it's going to be moving fast. And it needs to be on your quarterly business reviews. You got to be talking about your strategies. New tools are coming out again every single day. And again, we are not hearing people talk a lot about the video and image generators. And that to me is a huge red flag that isn't being talked about because they are being used. And so going back fully the other way, if you have those smells in your organization, like what is it really saying? And what it's really saying is you don't have a strategy, you're not thinking about it, and you're getting to the point where that's a competitive disadvantage right now. If your competitors are using AI as a way to boost their ideas, their IP, and so forth, not using it just as a tool. They're not just getting the 15% efficiency gains. If they're getting multipliers by, again, using it with the CEO as a trusted board of advisors. Like if you're getting new ideas and new things, like you're in a disadvantage. So the reason why we're pointing out the smells is to say like, hey, the people that don't have those smells are going to accelerate beyond what you think is possible. And again, don't forget that by augmenting the intelligence of every one of your staff, again, not just making it so they can produce an image faster or write copy faster, but if they're thinking through problems that your organization have faster, if they're coming up with better solutions, that is cost savings at a level that is, as we always say, like you should be trying to figure out how would you measure those advantages, not again the 5% that you're getting because they can write copy faster, but again, like how would you know if somebody using AI in your organization got a massive uptick in terms of like problem solving, throughput, et cetera?
Yeah, I think I love that what we're really saying here is strategy first, IT second. And I'm talking strategy first at the CEO level and then down to each division. Each division of your organization should have their own AI, artificial intelligence strategy. Then IT can help with the contracts and the implementation. And one thing I am going to say that is so important to me and should be a part of this strategy is training, education, and development of building the relationship with the artificial intelligence, how to properly use that intelligence on tap, how to customize it, and how to make sure it stays within the guardrails of the organization and of that division. Because it isn't just a Google, barking orders. There's a level of relationship that needs to happen with the intelligence to make it work better, stronger, faster. So that's another kind of thing to put out there is strategy first, IT second, and each division, right? So
Absolutely.
Leaders, that's the pivot leaders need to hear and they need to make. And it's okay whether your company has implemented something today, it's not too late to go back to each division, especially the CEO, and say, what's the strategy? How should we be using this? So Rob, this has been a wake-up call, and the IT trap isn't about being cautious. It's about quietly sabotaging your organization's future. So if you're listening and still letting IT own your AI strategy, here's my challenge. Ask your IT lead one simple question. What models are our people already using outside of the approved tools? And the answers may surprise you, but it's okay. There's still time to correct that. And the companies that escape the IT trap, Rob mentioned this, will hold the advantage. The ones that don't will quietly kind of fade away because they've lost that lead. So like we said, and like we always say, it's never too late to start. And even if you started and you feel like you're going down the wrong road or the wrong path, you can always correct. So the links to CharmIQ and past episodes are in the show notes. Join us next time as we tackle another hidden challenge of the AI age. Rob, thank you for cutting through the noise with us once again. And we want to hear from you. If you need help, you need a strategy, you need a starting point, or you just need some advice on how to get it right, reach out to us, DM us. You can always find us at charmiq.ai. We're here and we want to hear from you. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.